The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across 12 star systems. They were a young species by galactic standards. They had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years. Most alien civilizations considered them primitive and unimportant. The Velthari Empire was one such civilization. They ruled over 3,000 worlds and had existed for more than 10,000 years. They looked at humans the way humans once looked at insects. Ambassador Daniel Perry was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had spent 30 years in diplomatic service and had seen many strange things. But nothing had prepared him for this meeting. He stood aboard a diplomatic station that orbited Neptune. The station was neutral ground, chosen for this historic first contact between humanity and the Velthari Empire. Across the table from Daniel sat High Arbiter Keth Von. He was the supreme leader of the Velthari Empire. His body was insectoid and covered in a dark exoskeleton that seemed to absorb light. He stood nearly 8 feet tall. His eyes were crystalline and reflected nothing. No warmth. No emotion. Just cold calculation. Behind Keth Von stood 6 Velthari guards. Each one carried weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. Daniel had only 2 aides with him. Lieutenant Ben Carter stood to his left. A young woman named Marie Torres stood to his right. They were both nervous but trying not to show it. Keth Von spoke first. His voice was harsh, and his mandibles clicked with each word. Your species has expanded into territory that belongs to the Velthari Empire. The Orion sector has been claimed by us for 3,000 years. You will remove all human presence from these worlds within 30 of your solar cycles. Daniel kept his face neutral. High Arbiter. With respect, our colonies in the Orion sector were established on uninhabited worlds. We found no evidence of Velthari presence when we arrived. Keth Von made a sound that might have been laughter. Presence is not required for ownership. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to claim it. You are not strong. You are barely worthy of notice, but your expansion has become an irritation. Remove your colonies or face the consequences. Daniel leaned forward slightly. And what consequences would those be? The Velthari guards shifted. Keth Van's crystalline eyes seemed to glow faintly. Extermination. Complete and total. We have destroyed species far older and more powerful than yours. The Thalkari resisted us for 1,000 years before we broke them. The Minovians had technology that made yours look like stone tools. They are now our servants. You are nothing. Insects pretending to be a civilization. Lieutenant Ben Carter clenched his fists but said nothing. Marie Torres was pale but she held her ground. Daniel remained calm. I will take your message to the United Coalition, Daniel said. But I must warn you that humanity does not respond well to threats. Keth Von stood. His guards formed around him. This is not a threat, Ambassador. This is a statement of fact. Comply or die. The choice is yours. The Velthari delegation left the station without another word. Their ship departed within the hour. Daniel watched it go from the observation deck. Ben Carter stood beside him. Sir, what do we do? Ben asked. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Get me a secure channel to Earth. The Coalition needs to know what happened here. 3 days passed. Diplomatic channels remained open, but the Velthari refused to negotiate. They repeated the same demand. Leave the Orion sector or face destruction. The United Coalition debated endlessly. Some wanted to comply, some wanted to fight. No decision was reached. Then the Velthari made the decision for them. The colony on Kepler 442b was home to 14 million people. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green forests. Families lived there, children went to school. Farmers worked the land. Scientists studied the local ecosystem. It was a peaceful place. The Velthari fleet arrived without warning. 12 massive warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly above the planet. They did not issue demands. They did not wait for surrender. They simply opened fire. The orbital bombardment lasted 6 hours. When it was over, The surface of Kepler 442b was burning. Every city was destroyed. Every town was gone. 14 million human beings were dead. Men, women, and children. Gone in an instant. Admiral Carol Hughes received the transmission at Fleet Command on Mars. She was a woman in her 50s with short white hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had fought in 3 wars during her career. She had lost friends and comrades, but nothing had prepared her for the images on her screen. The casualty reports scrolled endlessly. Names and faces of the dead. Entire families wiped out. Schools full of children reduced to ash. Carol felt something cold settle in her chest. It was not fear. It was not grief. It was rage. Pure and absolute. Her aide, a young officer named Greg Palmer, stood beside her. His face was white with shock. "Admiral, what do we do?" Carol turned away from the screen. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "Get me every fleet commander on secure channel. Every single one. And contact the civilian government. Tell them we need emergency war powers authorized within the hour." Greg hesitated. "Admiral, the Velthari Empire has 3,000 worlds. We have 12. Their fleet numbers in the tens of thousands. We have maybe 500 combat-capable ships. The math does not favor us." Carol looked at him. There was something in her eyes that made Greg take a step back. "The Velthari just killed 14 million of our people. They murdered children to make a point. They think we will surrender because the numbers are against us. They think we will break because we are small and young and divided." She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. "They are wrong. They have made the worst mistake any species has ever made. They have given humanity a reason to unite. And when humanity unites, when we stop fighting each other and turn our attention outward, nothing in this galaxy will be able to stop us." She turned back to Greg. "Get me those commanders. The Velthari Empire is about to learn what happens when you wake a sleeping giant. They wanted a war. They are going to get one, and they are going to regret it for whatever remains of their miserable existence." The transmission went out within minutes. Every human world received the news. Every human being saw the images of Kepler 442b burning. And across 12 star systems, 14 billion humans felt the same cold rage that burned in Admiral Carol Hughes. The Velthari had studied humanity for decades. They had watched humans fight among themselves. They had seen their divisions and their conflicts. They thought they understood what humans were. They were wrong. They had no idea what they had just started. The news of Kepler 442b spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours, every colony, every station, every ship knew what had happened. 14 million dead. Murdered without warning. Murdered without mercy. The images played on every screen. The names of the dead scrolled endlessly. And something changed in the heart of humanity. Old enemies shook hands. Corporations that had fought legal battles for decades donated their resources freely. Nations that had barely spoken in centuries opened their borders to each other. Religious leaders who had disagreed on everything found common ground. Political parties that had opposed each other for generations released joint statements. The message was simple. We are one people. They came for our children. They will pay. The United Coalition declared total war within 24 hours. Every shipyard began working around the clock. Every factory converted to military production. Every able-bodied adult was given the option to serve. Millions volunteered within the first week. Captain Katie Walsh stood on the bridge of her ship, the destroyer, Relentless. She was 34 years old, with dark hair and sharp green eyes. She had joined the Navy at 18 and worked her way up through talent and determination. Now she commanded one of 200 ships in the hastily assembled Third Fleet. Her crew was a mix of veterans and volunteers. Some had served for decades. Others had been civilians just weeks ago. But they all shared the same fire in their eyes. They all wanted the same thing. Justice for the dead. Navigation Officer Greg Palmer sat at his station. He was young, barely 25. But he was good at his job. He checked the sensors one more time and then looked up at Katie. "Captain, we are approaching the Vega system. Long-range sensors are detecting enemy ships. Katie walked to the tactical display. The holographic image showed the star system in detail. There were 47 Velthari warships holding position near the third planet. They were not in any defensive formation. They were spread out casually as if they were waiting for something easy. They are not even bothering to prepare for a real fight, Katie observed. They think this will be a slaughter. Her executive officer, a man named Joe Mitchell, stood beside her. He was older than Katie by 10 years and had seen combat before. Their ships are bigger than ours. Their weapons hit harder. Their shields are supposed to be nearly unbreakable. On paper, they should win easily. Katie smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good thing we are not fighting on paper. The Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 200 human ships against 47 Velthari vessels. The enemy ships were massive, each one nearly a kilometer long. They bristled with weapons. Their dark hulls seemed to swallow the light of the distant star. The Velthari commander sent a single message. "Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Admiral Carol Hughes responded from her flagship. "This is Admiral Carol Hughes of the United Coalition Navy. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. And we do not forgive what you did to our people. Today you learn what it means to fight humanity." Quote, the battle began. The Velthari expected the human ships to charge forward in a desperate attack. They expected panic and chaos. They expected easy targets. What they got was something completely different. The human fleet launched thousands of drones, small unmanned craft that swarmed toward the enemy formation. The Velthari had never seen anything like this. Their weapons were designed to destroy large ships, not swarms of tiny machines. They tried to adapt, but the drones were too fast and too numerous. While the drones occupied the enemy, the human ships moved into carefully planned positions. They did not attack directly. They herded the Velthari vessels, pushing them together, limiting their ability to maneuver. Captain Katie Walsh commanded the lead element. Her ship took heavy fire as she drew the enemy toward the trap. The Relentless shook with each impact. Alarms blared. Damage reports came in constantly. "Shields at 40%, Greg reported. "Hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. Casualties are mounting." Katie gripped the arms of her command chair. "Hold the line. We just need to keep them focused on us for 3 more minutes." Those 3 minutes felt like hours. The Relentless was hit again and again. Her sister ships suffered similar damage. But they held. They did not break. They did not run. Then Admiral Hughes gave the order. "All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Light them up." The trap sprung. Human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids and debris emerged from all directions. They caught the Velthari fleet in a perfect crossfire. And they deployed something new: the Cascade drones. These special drones carried devices designed by human scientists who had studied captured Velthari technology. The devices emitted a targeted electromagnetic pulse that disrupted Velthari neural pathways. It did not kill them, but it paralyzed them completely. The effect was immediate. Velthari warships went dark as their crews collapsed at their stations. Weapons stopped firing. Shields failed. Ships drifted helplessly. Human boarding parties launched within minutes. Marines in specialized combat suits breached the disabled vessels. They moved through the dark corridors, securing each ship methodically. The paralyzed Velthari could do nothing but watch as their vessels were captured. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 31 Velthari ships had been captured or destroyed. Humanity lost 12 ships, but managed to rescue the crews from 9 of them. It was a victory beyond anyone's expectations. Katie Walsh sat in her damaged command chair as the final reports came in. The Relentless was badly hurt, but still functional. Her crew was exhausted but alive. And they had won. Joe Mitchell handed her a cup of coffee. His hands were shaking slightly. "We actually did it. We beat them." Katie took the coffee and stared at the tactical display. The captured Velthari ships were being towed to secure locations. Prisoners were being processed. The impossible had happened. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly. "The Velthari have thousands more ships. They will send a larger fleet next time. They will learn from their mistakes." Joe nodded. "So will we. That is what humans do. We learn. We adapt. We survive." Across human space, the news of the victory spread. People who had been afraid began to hope. People who had hoped began to believe. The impossible had happened once. Maybe it could happen again. High Arbiter Kethvan received the report in his throne room on the Velthari homeworld. He read it 3 times because he could not believe what he was seeing. 31 ships lost to a species they considered insects. It was unprecedented. It was unthinkable. His advisors stood in silence, waiting for his response. Kethvan set down the report and looked at them with cold, crystalline eyes. "Send the second armada," he ordered. 500 ships. Crush them completely. Leave nothing alive." The advisors bowed and hurried to obey. Kethvan remained on his throne, staring at nothing. For the first time in his long life, a small seed of doubt had planted itself in his mind. What if the humans were not as weak as they seemed? He pushed the thought away. It was impossible. The Velthari Empire had conquered countless species. Humanity was just another obstacle to be removed. The Second Armada would end this rebellion once and for all. He was certain of it. Deep beneath the red surface of Mars, in a facility that did not officially exist, Dr. Lisa Grant was working on something that could change the war. She was a small woman with tired eyes and messy brown hair. She had not slept properly in weeks. None of her team had. They had been given a simple directive from the military leadership. Find a weakness in Velthari biology. Find a way to beat them. Lisa stared at the holographic display showing the molecular structure of Velthari nervous tissue. She had been staring at it for hours, looking for something. Anything that could give humanity an advantage. The Velthari were silicon-based lifeforms. Their exoskeletons were incredibly hard. Conventional weapons could hurt them, but it took enormous firepower to bring even one down. Her assistant, a young man named Peter Simmons, brought her another cup of coffee. He looked as tired as she felt. "Any progress?" Lisa shook her head. "Their biology is remarkably efficient. Evolution or engineering, I cannot tell which. But they have very few weaknesses." "Very few is not the same as none," Peter pointed out. Lisa paused. She looked at the display again. Then she looked at a different data set, one showing the electrical activity in captured Velthari specimens. Something clicked in her mind. She sat up straighter. "Peter, look at this. Their nervous system relies on very precise electrical signals, much more precise than ours. Human nerves can handle a lot of interference and still function. Velthari nerves cannot." Peter leaned in to look. "So, if we disrupt those signals somehow, their entire system shuts down. Not death necessarily, but complete paralysis. They would be unable to move, unable to think, unable to do anything." Lisa was already pulling up simulation software. "We need to design a device that generates a targeted electromagnetic pulse, something that specifically interferes with Velthari neural frequencies without affecting humans or our equipment." They worked through the night. By morning, they had a theoretical design. By the end of the week, they had a working prototype. Lisa called it the Cascade device because of the way it caused Velthari neural activity to collapse in a cascading failure. General Sam Mitchell arrived at the facility 3 days later. He was a large man with a scarred face and hands that had seen combat. He listened as Lisa explained her invention. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You are telling me this thing can take down every Velthari in a 3-kilometer radius without killing them?" Lisa nodded. "Theoretically, yes. The paralysis lasts approximately 2 hours. After that, their systems reboot, and they regain function. But during those 2 hours, they are completely helpless." Sam looked at the small device on the table. It was no bigger than a football. "How many can you make? With full resources?" "Thousands. Tens of thousands, maybe." Sam picked up his communicator. Get me Admiral Hughes. Tell her we have a game changer. While the scientists worked on weapons, something else was happening across human space, something the Velthari had not anticipated. Humanity was not breaking under the pressure of war. It was thriving. Civilian volunteers flooded recruitment centers faster than they could be processed. Factory workers pulled triple shifts without complaint. Engineers slept beside their projects, unwilling to stop, even for rest. Teachers left their classrooms to drive supply transports. Doctors relocated to military hospitals. Artists created propaganda that spread across the networks, inspiring millions. A captured Velthari officer was brought to a holding facility on Luna. His name was Vortan, and he had been a ship commander before his vessel was taken in the Battle of Vega. Intelligence Commander Rick Santos was assigned to interrogate him. Rick was a patient man. He had spent 20 years in intelligence work and knew that useful information came from conversation, not torture. He sat across from the alien and studied him carefully. Vortan was smaller than most Velthari, probably young by their standards. His crystalline eyes flickered with something that might have been confusion. "I have questions," Rick said calmly. "You do not have to answer them. But I think you want to understand what is happening as much as we want to understand you." Vortan was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, his mandibles clicking softly. "Your species confuses me. We have conquered hundreds of civilizations. All of them followed the same pattern. We demonstrate superior force. They resist, briefly. They realize they cannot win. They surrender or they die. It is simple mathematics." Rick nodded. "That is how it usually works. But you are different," Vortan continued. "We destroyed one of your worlds. We killed millions of your people. By every calculation, this should have broken your will to fight. Instead, your resistance has increased. Your production has increased. Your recruitment has increased. This does not follow logic." Rick leaned back in his chair. "Let me tell you something about humans. We are not a logical species. We are an emotional species. We love deeply, and we hate fiercely. When you killed those people on Kepler 442b, you did not break us. You unified us. You gave us something we have not had in centuries. A common enemy. A common purpose." Vortan tilted his head. "This is weakness. Emotion clouds judgment. It leads to poor decisions. Sometimes," Rick agreed. "But it also leads to determination that logic cannot explain. You calculated that we would surrender because the odds were against us. But humans do not calculate when our families are threatened. We do not do math when our children are murdered. We do whatever it takes to protect what we love. And we never, ever stop." The alien was quiet. Rick continued. "Your empire conquered species that thought like you do. Species that looked at the numbers and made rational decisions. We are not that species. We are the species that survived ice ages by refusing to give up. We are the species that crossed oceans on wooden ships because we wanted to see what was on the other side. We are the species that walked on our moon not because it was easy but because it was hard. You did not just attack a civilization. You woke up something ancient and stubborn and absolutely relentless." Vortan stared at him with those crystalline eyes. "You believe you can win this war?" Rick smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "I believe we will fight until there is nothing left of us. And I believe that before we fall, we will make you regret ever learning our name. The question is not whether we can win. The question is how much you are willing to lose to beat us." The interrogation ended shortly after. Vortan was returned to his cell. He sat in the darkness and thought about what the human had said. He thought about the battle where his ship had been captured. He thought about the strange, small, fragile creatures who had boarded his vessel and taken it from him. For the first time in his life, Vortan felt something unfamiliar. It took him a while to identify it. When he did, he was deeply troubled. It was fear. He was afraid of the humans, and somewhere in his mind, a voice whispered that his people had made a terrible mistake. The Second Armada of the Velthari Empire was the largest military force assembled in 1,000 years. 500 warships, each one a kilometer of armored death, crewed by millions of Velthari warriors who had never known defeat. They traveled through the void toward the Proxima Centauri system where human forces had gathered for a final stand. Admiral Carol Hughes watched them come. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the carrier Perseverance. Around her the crew worked in tense silence. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. 212 human ships against 500 Velthari vessels. It should have been impossible. Carol had spent weeks preparing for this moment. She had studied every engagement, every battle, every scrap of data about how the Velthari fought. She had found patterns. The Velthari were ancient and powerful, but they were also rigid. They followed protocols that had been established millennia ago. They did not improvise. They did not adapt quickly. They expected enemies to behave in predictable ways. Humanity was not predictable. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Hughes. Carol spoke into the communication system. Her voice was calm and steady. The enemy believes this will be their greatest victory. They believe they will crush us here and march unopposed to Earth. They are wrong. Today we show them what humanity is capable of. Today we turn the tide of this war. Hold your positions. Trust the plan. And remember why we fight. Captain Katie Walsh sat in the command chair of the Relentless. Her ship had been repaired after the Battle of Vega, but it still bore scars from that engagement. So did her crew. They had lost friends in that fight. They had almost died themselves, but they were still here, still fighting. Enemy fleet entering weapons range in 10 minutes, Greg Palmer reported from his station. Katie nodded. Signal the fleet. First wave prepares to engage. The first wave was a feint. 50 ships, including the Relentless, would charge directly at the enemy formation. They would draw fire. They would take damage. They would make the Velthari believe this was a desperate last attack by a defeated enemy. It was a lie. The human ships accelerated toward the massive Velthari fleet. Enemy weapons began firing. Bright beams of energy that crossed the void like angry stars. The first human ship exploded. Then another. Katie gripped her chair as the Relentless shook from a near miss. Shields failing, Joe Mitchell reported. We cannot take much more of this. Hold course, Katie ordered. Just a little longer. The Velthari commander saw the human attack and felt satisfaction. The small creatures were finally breaking. They were throwing themselves against superior forces in a futile gesture. Soon, this would be over. Soon the Velthari Empire would have another victory to celebrate. He did not see the second wave coming. 100 human ships had been hiding. Their engines cold, drifting among the debris and asteroids at the edge of the system. When the Velthari fleet was fully committed to pursuing the first wave, these ships powered up and attacked from behind. The Velthari formation was caught completely off guard. Ships that had been firing forward suddenly found themselves taking fire from the rear. They tried to turn, to respond. But the human ships were too fast, too maneuverable, and then the cascade devices were deployed. Thousands of small drones carried the devices deep into the enemy formation. They detonated in sequence, creating overlapping waves of electromagnetic disruption. Velthari crew members collapsed at their stations. Ships went dark. Weapons fell silent. All boarding parties launch, Admiral Hughes ordered. Human Marines swarmed the disabled vessels. They moved in teams, securing corridors and compartments with brutal efficiency. The paralyzed Velthari could only watch as their ships were taken from them one by one. Katie Walsh led her ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Relentless was badly damaged but still fighting. She targeted the flagship, the massive vessel where the enemy commander sat helpless in his command chair. Target their bridge, Katie ordered. Disable their command and control. The Relentless fired. The enemy flagship shuddered as precise shots took out communication arrays and sensor systems. Within minutes, the Velthari Second Armada was leaderless as well as paralyzed. The battle lasted 8 hours. When it was over, humanity had captured 214 Velthari warships intact. They had taken 300,000 prisoners. They had destroyed another 100 enemy vessels. Human losses were significant. 47 ships destroyed and thousands of casualties. But it was a victory beyond anything anyone had imagined possible. Admiral Hughes stood on the bridge of the Perseverance and looked at the tactical display. It showed the captured enemy fleet, now under human control. It showed the debris of destroyed Velthari vessels. It showed a battlefield where the impossible had happened. Her communications officer looked up. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Velthari homeworld. They are requesting a ceasefire." Carol allowed herself a small smile. "Tell them we will consider their request. But first, they need to understand something. This war is not over. Not until we say it is." The news of the victory at Proxima Centauri spread across human space within hours. People celebrated in the streets. Families who had feared the worst wept with relief. For the first time since the war began, humanity believed it could win, but Admiral Hughes knew the truth. The Velthari Empire still had thousands of ships. They still controlled 3,000 worlds. One victory, even a great one, did not end a war against such an enemy. She called a meeting of her senior commanders. Katie Walsh attended via holographic link, her face still showing the exhaustion of battle. Others joined from across the fleet. "We have won a battle," Carol said. "But we have not won the war. The Velthari will regroup. They will learn from their mistakes. They will come at us again, with even greater force. If we sit back and wait for them, we will eventually be overwhelmed." She activated a star map showing Velthari space. Thousands of worlds glowed in the display. "We need to take the fight to them. Not to conquer. Not to destroy. But to liberate." The Velthari rule over hundreds of subject species, slaves, servants, entire civilizations held in bondage for thousands of years. If we can reach them, arm them, inspire them to rise up, we can break the empire from within. Katie Walsh spoke up. "That is a dangerous strategy, Admiral. We would be operating deep in enemy territory with limited support." Carol nodded. "I know. But it is our best chance. The Velthari expect us to defend our worlds. They do not expect us to attack theirs. That is exactly why we have to do it." The commanders exchanged looks. It was risky. It was bold. It was exactly the kind of unpredictable strategy that had won them victory at Proxima. One by one, they agreed. The next phase of the war was about to begin. And the Velthari Empire had no idea what was coming. The Velthari homeworld was ancient beyond human understanding. Its cities had stood for 10,000 years. Its monuments celebrated victories over countless species. Its people had never known defeat, never experienced the humiliation of being conquered. They believed they were superior to all other life in the galaxy. That belief was dying. High Arbiter Kethvan stood in the Great Council chamber, surrounded by his advisors and generals. The holographic display before them showed the state of their empire. It was falling apart. Human fleets had pushed deep into Velthari space. Not to conquer, as the Velthari had expected, but to liberate. They visited world after world, where subject species had served the Empire for millennia. They brought weapons, they brought training, they brought something far more dangerous than either. They brought hope. The Thalkari were the first to rise. They had been slaves of the Velthari for 3,000 years. When human ships arrived in their system, they did not hesitate. Within weeks, they had overthrown their Velthari overlords and declared independence. Human advisors helped them establish a defense force. Human engineers helped them repair their infrastructure. Human diplomats welcomed them as allies. Then the Minovians rose. Then the Crystalline Collective. Then a dozen more species. Then 50. Then 100. The empire that had seemed unshakable was crumbling from within. Worlds that had been held in bondage for generations were breaking free. "We have lost control of 400 systems in the past month," one of Kethvan's advisors reported. His voice was hollow with disbelief. "Our fleets are spread too thin. We cannot respond to every uprising," another advisor spoke. "The humans are not trying to hold territory. They strike, they liberate, they move on. Our commanders cannot predict where they will appear next." Kethvan said nothing. He stared at the map showing his empire dissolving. Everything his ancestors had built over 10 millennia was being torn down by creatures his people had considered barely worthy of notice. A communication request appeared. Kethvon knew who it was. He had been expecting this call. He accepted it. Ambassador Daniel Perry appeared on the display. He looked older than he had during their first meeting on the Neptune station. The war had aged him. But there was strength in his eyes that had not been there before. Behind Daniel stood representatives of 17 species. The Thalkari ambassador, tall and willowy with silver skin. The Minovian delegate, a being of living crystal that shimmered in the light. Others that Kethvon recognized as former subjects of his empire. They called themselves the Liberation Alliance now. "High Arbiter," Daniel said. His voice was calm. "I believe you have a decision to make." Kethvon was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke. "You could have destroyed us. Your weapons, your tactics, your numbers now. You could have ended the Velthari Empire entirely, burned our worlds, exterminated our species as we tried to do to you. Why did you not?" Daniel considered the question. "Because that is not who we are. We did not fight this war for conquest or revenge. We fought it because you killed 14 million of our people without warning. We fought it because you looked at us and saw insects to be crushed. We fought it because no species should have to live under the threat of extinction simply for refusing to kneel." He stepped forward, his eyes meeting the crystalline gaze of the High Arbiter. "You studied us for decades. You watched us fight each other. You saw our wars and our conflicts and our divisions. You thought you understood what we were. You were wrong." Kethvon's mandibles clicked softly. "Then tell me, what are you?" Daniel smiled, but there was no triumph in it. Only a kind of sad wisdom. "We are survivors. Our planet tried to kill us with ice ages and plagues and disasters beyond counting. We survived. We tried to kill ourselves with wars and weapons that could have ended our species. We survived. We are small and fragile, and we live such short lives compared to your kind. But those short lives taught us to value every moment. Our conflicts taught us how to fight, and our emotions, which you consider weakness, give us something your empire never had." "What is that?" Kethvon asked. "Something worth dying for. Love. Family. Freedom. The belief that every life has value. Your empire conquered through fear. You held your subjects in chains because they believed resistance was impossible. We showed them it was possible. We gave them hope. And hope, High Arbiter, is the most dangerous thing in the universe." The council chamber was silent. Kethvon looked at the representatives standing behind Daniel. Former slaves. Former subjects. Now free beings who had chosen to stand with humanity against the empire that had oppressed them. "What do you want?" Kethvon asked finally. "Surrender," Daniel said. "Complete and unconditional. The empire dissolves. All subject species gain full independence and self-determination. Your military is reduced to a defense force sufficient to protect your homeworld and nothing more. And you personally will stand trial for the massacre at Kepler 442b. 14 million people died on your orders. There must be justice for them." Kethvon felt something he had never experienced in his long life. Defeat. True, absolute defeat. "And if I refuse?" Daniel's expression did not change. "Then we continue. We will free every world. We will tear down every monument to your empire's cruelty. Your fleets will be destroyed, your power will be broken. And 1,000 years from now, when other species tell stories about the Velthari, they will remember only one thing, that you declared war on the wrong species." The High Arbiter looked at the map one final time. He saw the worlds he had lost. He saw the fleets that had been destroyed. He saw the future that was no longer possible. The empire of his ancestors, built over 10,000 years, was finished. The only question was whether the Velthari themselves would survive its fall. He turned to his council. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. A few, the wisest ones, looked relieved. The war had cost them more than they had ever imagined possible. Perhaps it was time to end it. Keth Von turned back to the display. He looked at Daniel Perry, the human ambassador who had once stood alone against the might of the Velthari Empire. The man had warned him. He had said that humanity did not respond well to threats. Keth Von had not listened. He should have listened. "We surrender," Keth Von said. The words tasted like ash. Completely and unconditionally. "The war is over." Daniel nodded. There was no celebration in his eyes, only the exhaustion of a man who had carried a heavy burden for too long. "We will send representatives to discuss the terms. The transition will be peaceful. Your people will not be harmed." The communication ended. Keth Von stood alone in the council chamber as his advisors filed out. The great monuments of his ancestors surrounded him, celebrating victories that now meant nothing. The humans had won, not through superior numbers or technology, but through something the Velthari had never understood. They had won through hope and unity, and the simple, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The Liberation Alliance grew to include hundreds of species. Human ships explored regions of space that had never been mapped. The former slaves of the Velthari Empire built new civilizations, free from oppression for the first time in millennia. And on Earth, in the Great Hall of the Alliance capital, a simple plaque was mounted above the entrance. It bore the names of the 14 million who had died on Kepler 442b. Beneath the names was a single line that humanity would never forget. "They made us remember who we are." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the ages. Humanity was young and small, and seemingly fragile. But within them burned a fire that could not be extinguished, a determination that could not be broken, a spirit that would never, ever surrender. They were the wrong species to threaten, and now everyone knew it.